we're not Microsoft. Whatever advice we give is the other side of the fence. I used to work for Microsoft. Therefore, if there's anything that you think is contradicting your knowledge, or you think, maybe not sure, verify with your agreements and any licensing advice, which we're not giving today. We're not giving today licensing advice. Verify that with Microsoft product terms, which you can Google and find on Google. It's very easy. And we'll start with what is a compliance audit? What is it? What is the legal basis? So the stated goal in the compliance audit is to verify your compliance and protect intellectual property rights of Microsoft. Pretty simple. The actual reality, which is not far from the stated goal, is more often you're just lured into a new deal, often on unfavorable terms, which is many companies see that as a better outcome. And if there's no other outcome, that's probably where we would be aiming for. Just to say, thank you, Max. I know we're bad boys here, bad girls. We didn't do the right thing, but shall we discuss future relationship instead of penalties? Because we plan to do something, in the future with Microsoft licenses and Microsoft Cloud, and that's the reality of the outcomes of compliance audits. Most of them end up in that area, unless you're in SPLA. If you're a SPLA provider, that will not be that easy for you. But in normal audits, that's my at least experience, is you get the bill and then you sit down and then you talk to Microsoft commercially about how you're going to resolve it. The only thing is your position will be undermined, which we'll come back to soon. I don't know, Daryl, if you want to add anything here at all.
Just quickly add on that the idea of an audit is to create leverage. That's the bottom line. There's always an end goal for the audit. Usually it's not to get a certain amount of money from you. The end goal is to upgrade you to something, a cloud agreement, Office 365, push you in a certain direction, and the audit provides leverage. So it's part of the overall negotiation strategy that Microsoft has. Always keep that in the back of your mind and understand, put yourself in Microsoft's shoes and understand what's driving them. And then it's easier to manage the audit process with that understanding.
Thank you, Daryl. I want to say thank you, by the way, a bit of an interruption, to Olivia, Prashant, and Nigel for becoming SAMexpert supporters. We're getting so much support. It's, you know what? It's so heartwarming, I must tell you. And yeah, we will deliver on the promise. What's in the perks. And by the way, the first Microsoft licensing Q&A just for the members is going to be the 1st of November. Please come with your questions. There's a legal basis, which I won't read you, from the screen. There's no reason. We will then discuss parts of it in the next upcoming slides. But so when there's a question about how can they audit us? How can they audit? You signed the agreement, which says they can audit. So this particular quote is from the Microsoft customer agreement, which you can Google and find yourselves. I compared it with the most recent terms in Microsoft Business and Services MPSA agreement, which is what supersedes the enterprise agreement, sits on top of it. They're very similar. So Microsoft harmonized them. MPSA, very similar terms. Maybe commas somewhere, little details, but the core principles are exactly the same, which I'll cover in the next few steps. So you can find it, you can read it, and familiarize yourself with this, please. Because this particular contract is available and you can find it, and this is the exact quote, which is pasted on this slide. But this talks about the either self assessments or audits when you are sent someone from a big four. Microsoft says here independent auditor. Usually it's one of the big four, except for in some jurisdictions, in some territories where big four is not that present, or maybe there are local laws that require hiring local companies. There may be exceptions. Normally, I have never seen anyone except for Ernst & Young, KPMG, and who was the third one? Deloitte.
Deloitte.
PwC doesn't, at least
PwC.
didn't. The reason, by the way, the reason PwC didn't audit is PwC created the auditing program for Microsoft. So they were contracted to build a framework. And as far as I remember, that's my inside knowledge, which may be not right. But yeah, I learned that in somewhere around 2013. I was always wondering why PwC is not auditing. And then I heard recently that PwC, I actually applied for that job. They were looking for someone to build an audit practice. That was very long ago, in between my two companies. So yeah, I fortunately I didn't succeed. So, but don't be mistaken. So these are all audits, but they have different character. But these are all audits. So you have license reviews and you have Microsoft SAM. What are these? These do not have legal basis, and we'll talk about it. And we also have self-audit and independent auditor audit, which are stipulated in your licensing agreement. So the first couple are partner-led, partner-assisted. Usually, it's a more softer touch thing. It's not really a harsh audit. It's usually an up-sales exercise, and I'll come to that topic as well. Which Microsoft introduced to kind of remove the stigma of audits and also to sort of increase the auditing base, at the same time providing value to the customers. This is being gradually reduced right now. And I was just told there's only one or two types of engagements that are still left. This is still going on, and I've heard. So, for instance, I've seen recently a post from Romania, from Microsoft persons saying, "Don't refuse these audits because they are, soft touch audits and stuff like that." So they're going on. It depends on the territory, probably. The third and fourth number here on this slide, they have legal basis, and you can't really refuse them because, as I said, you signed for them. So Microsoft's point of view, Microsoft actually published an FAQ in 2017, which was kind of battling this point of view that I'm just trying to explain. They're also audits. Microsoft in that FAQ says they're not audits. They're not designed to be audits. But don't take it. Kind of take it with a pinch of salt, because your license position is still reviewed, and Microsoft will know about it. An ALP is one of the outcomes. How is that not an audit? It's a soft touch, but it's still an audit. So they're voluntary. But there's another thing. Be careful with how you interpret them. Do not push back too hard. Do not be nasty. Although they're voluntary, play nice. It's my advice, because that if you don't do that, you may end up with a real audit. And then again, I've seen LinkedIn posts from official people saying that. I don't know if they've deleted them, but I've seen them. So the objective for Microsoft SAM, as Microsoft says, that help monetize, help maximize the value, minimize risks, and achieve more with the customer's IT investment. The actual truth is, because I did those, I piloted those, and I didn't realize that. And then I was told that, Alex, you're not bringing return on investment from certain customers. And I was, because that's not unofficial information, I was quite shocked, and I asked, what return on investment? And then basically I was, the explanation was very simple. Like, in what sort of world are you living, Alex? If you're given money by Microsoft to do something, Microsoft would expect you to bring some money back, not just some money, but maybe multiplied by a certain number. So although this is to help you maximize your investment, the partner that performs soft touch review is expected to upsell you more licenses. If they come out of the exercise with zero, they will not they will not get any more business from Microsoft. That's as simple as that. Very harsh. Audits are audits. Audits are audits. So let's not spend too much time on that. So there are 9 types of risks. There are actually more, but the core risks of an audit. So let's talk about that, because this is a training, and if you're not familiar with this, let me explain that. So firstly, that's unbudgeted licenses. Obviously, that's not in your budget, and then they're not in your budget. Then the auditor discovers that you need these licenses. You need to buy them. You have only 30 days, since you agreed with Microsoft on settlement. You'll have only 30 days to purchase the licenses. You may not have the budget for them. Audit penalties, which vary. We have a slide about them. So, but it also varied in history. Right now, you have to buy licenses if you found non-compliant for more than 5%. You now have to buy licenses at 125% of your price list with your discounts. It used to be harsher. It used to be 125% of the public price list. So, without any discounts, without, even referring to your price list. So that's the penalty. You have to pay a 25% premium on top of normal licenses costs. Auditor fees. If Microsoft finds you non-compliant for more than 5%, you have to reimburse Microsoft for the auditor fees. Another risk, unplanned resources. So you may have people working in your IT department doing all the projects, the cloud migrations. You're paying them salary; they must be busy, and then suddenly you need to take them and put them on an audit. This will always happen, even if you're prepared for an audit. Well, this will always happen. But if you're not prepared, this disruption will be much, much more costly. There's internal cost. There's a process disruption because you're taking these resources. That's another risk of an audit. Undermined negotiation position. Do I need to explain that? If you're guilty, how can you ask for a bigger discount? Probably not. Damaged vendor relationship. Sorry, probably slipped through two points. So going back, damaged vendor relationship. Obvious. Your relationship with Microsoft is damaged. You're a nasty person. You're a nasty company. You're non-compliant. You're violating intellectual property rights. Legal action, if you in some audits, not with Microsoft, but I know that with Oracle that happened. Customers sometimes would actually initiate a legal action against the auditors, but it's not unheard of. And what I'm saying here applies to any vendor on many of these slides. It's not unheard of a company actually launching a legal action against another company that violated their IP rights. If they don't comply, that could go to court. Very rarely, but may happen. And negative PR if that leaks to press. And sometimes certain companies are used as scapegoats. So others will think twice before doing any nasty things with Microsoft licenses. Can you stop an audit? That's a good question. So the first two, you can actually stop them. And you can talk to your local Microsoft because they are initiated locally in the local Microsoft. The initiation for license reviews of Microsoft SAM, the soft touch ones that are led by Microsoft partners, Microsoft resellers, Microsoft CSPs, these can be stopped not pretty easily. Sometimes you can't really stop them, but you can still call your local AM. You can talk to them if you know whom to talk to. Potentially, but please be nice. Don't be rude. Don't be rude because, as I said, it may result, depending on the territory again, on the country. It may not be the same in the UK. I haven't heard of Microsoft-led some review in the UK for quite a while. But in other territories, if you're rude to them, if you just say, ignore them, throw it under the carpet, they may actually call their license compliance department, which is in Ireland for Europe and in Singapore for Asia, and probably in Redmond for the States. And they will call their license compliance department and ask to initiate a full-on audit, and it may happen that they will. And those audits you may not stop through the local office at all. Local office has absolutely zero influence unless you are huge, unless you are, I don't know, British Telecom, Unilever, or something like that. Then maybe you can go through the local office and reach out to license compliance department and say, can we please not do that? But these are much, much more difficult to stop. Almost impossible, I would say. Almost impossible. So you'd rather be ready. So let's study the terms very quickly. So remember, I showed you a slide with the terms. So time constraints. There are only two time constraints. Sometimes then either auditors or Microsoft may try and impose other time constraints. Let's just quickly separate them into the ones that you agreed contractually to and the ones that they trying to impose on you, but you don't have to agree to. So the first time constraint is the time between the notice and the time you need to respond to it, engage with an auditor. That's 30 days from the start. You receive the notice letter in an email or in mail somehow. You only have 30 days, and that is something you have to do to come back and say, yeah, fine, okay, let's talk. It's not necessarily has to be a kickoff meeting. You just need to respond. You need to initiate the conversation. And the other time constraint which is stipulated is when you agreed on the position, when you've gone through all the negotiation steps, then you have 30 days to settle, to buy the licenses and to pay the auditor fees if you have to pay them. And there's a whole load of other steps in between, which I try to simplify, but actually they more. We'll get to the process in the third part of this training. But there are no other stipulations promptly. And how long can this cost? How long can this actually drag on? As I said, I've been in audits that were dragging on for 3 years, easily. I wouldn't advise you doing so, but this may happen. The bigger you are, the more disconnected you are. And the biggest problem with such long audits is that in the end, if you're found non-compliant, you're going to pay for the entirety of these years and days and hours at Deloitte's or KPMG or EY rates. Do you want to do that? But then again, it's up to you. You can prolong it. And Microsoft, by the way, promises, this is something that's not on that slide. Microsoft promises minimal disruption to your business. That's a legal promise. They promise it. So this is something you can use as just to say, no, what we can't do it today. We can only do it in 1 month from now. The only thing is, please respond in 30 days. Do not put yourself in a breach of contract position. The penalties. So basically, penalties differ depending on how much is your non-compliance. Right now, the formula is not per product as it used to be 10 years ago. Right now, the formula is compared to the overall number of licenses, your overall non-compliance. If that is less than 5%, if that's below 5%, then all you need to do is to buy missing licenses with your discounts. It's just an excuse. Oh, sorry, we'll buy them. It's fine. Anything above 5%, 5% or more, not just above 5% or above 5%, that then triggers 2 types of penalties. So you have to buy your licenses at 125% price with your discounts. So on top of your discounts, basically. So first the price is discounted, then you apply 125. That's the price you're going to pay. And then you have to reimburse Microsoft for all the auditor expenses. And as I said, the longer the auditor is doing the audit, the more you have to pay. Something like, normally somebody asked me, how much do you normally pay to an auditor? So this is all in DA. So what I know, I was never told the actual number. What I know from various rumors is that in an average audit, that's like $40,000 auditor fees on top of the licenses that you have to buy at an inflated price.
So Alex,
Otherwise,
let me just add
yep,
on to that from formal documents. Okay, this is no rumors. Formal documents, an audit fee ranges depending on the size and how long it took between 28,000 US dollars to around 40,000 US dollars, and that's formal.
that may be territory related.
And yeah, exactly. It's territory and size of organization, but the customer always pays the audit fee. That's the request, especially
Unless
if it's
you're
over
below
5%.
5%.
Yeah,
Because
over 5%, and everybody's over 5%.
I actually supported a couple of customers who were below because they were with me on the service, and I looked after the licenses for 4 years. Auditors came, they found more than 5%. We just basically pushed back, said, that was an audit defense exercise. We said, no, you don't understand the licensing design. There wasn't a difficult pushback. We laid out how the licenses should be assigned. They recalculated. The customer only paid 50K for licenses, no penalties.
But it's important to
They did
realize that it doesn't matter how you start. It always ends before the negotiation phase. It's always going to be over 5% because that's the agenda. Then there is the
Oh, yeah.
negotiation. There's
Absolutely.
a clear agenda to position the customer with over 5% non-compliance, and then you can start negotiating. If I may, on this slide, Alex, there's a question here that I wanted to just give a point. So Stephen's asking, what is that 5% based on? So I want to say that I've argued with Microsoft multiple times. What is this 5%? Okay, what's 5% of what? 5% of your spend, 5% of your overall quantity of licenses.
Yeah, that's a good
If you
question,
read
isn't
very
it?
carefully, it's not clear. It's
No, it's
not
not.
clear.
No, it's not. No, no.
Okay,
Let me
it's
find
not
this.
clear. So Stephen is very. The question is in place. I've never got a straight answer from Microsoft.
If I
Everybody's going to give you a different answer. It's a
mm-hmm.
completely open area, and it's worded that way. It's not by chance, because it leaves so much leeway for the auditor and for Microsoft to shout under license, under license. So you can basically you can Microsoft will come back and they will be very, very clear about what they see as a 5%. But I've never accepted that. And you can argue, because of the way that it's worded, that it's 5% of spend, it's 5% of your number of licenses. And then what are number of licenses? You're counting licenses, you're counting calls, you're counting client access licenses, you're
Yeah,
counting Office 365,
virtual machines.
virtual machines. Um, this is an area. This is an area where I've pushed back multiple times because of the way that it's worded, and it's a good place to start the negotiations with. It will throw them completely off track.
Look what's written here. If unlicensed use is 5% of or more of customers' total use of all products.
What's
Exactly.
total use?
What the hell is that?
What's total use? Actual use? What's actual use? Am I using the product? Am I not using the product? Is it activated? Is it on the cloud? Is it Office 365? Is it the number of users? And if I'm out of compliance on SQL Server, then is it 5% from my total license spend with Azure as well now, and with Office 365 and my project licenses? So there's place to mitigate this.
There's another interesting clause. I don't really some of these things I don't understand, but I guess just many people are very companies are very concerned about confidentiality. So Microsoft really do not explain what they mean by under non-disclosure obligations. That's the only phrase you get. I just tell you from my practice is what happens is auditor sees all your raw data because they need to process it. They need it to do the calculations, but they don't pass it on to Microsoft unless you ask. So that's how it works. So in that case, Microsoft won't see your data. And by the way, in partner-led audits, all the data is obfuscated before it gets to Microsoft. So Microsoft doesn't see your server names, IP addresses, usernames, or anything like that. That doesn't get to Microsoft. But the auditors, they need to see it to do the calculations. There's no way around it. There's certain data that if I provide a internal review, I need to see. And if you say no, we're not going to give you server names, then you need to obfuscate them in a certain way. So yeah, that's how it works. So if that's a concern for you, just clarify that. Make sure you have a watertight NDA with the auditor. But otherwise, they usually have their own form which talks about that. So your data normally, unless you ask, doesn't get to Microsoft. That actually creates problems. That creates problems because then when the downsides is you can't later argue with Microsoft about certain details. But on that server, they didn't apply the license this way. Microsoft doesn't have the data, and Microsoft doesn't want to discuss it. They want you to finalize everything with the auditor. They want you to sort out these problems, and they want to be left with an ALP, and you with that ALP in the negotiation room. That's the goal. So that's the goal. That's how it works right now. Uh, little break. I just need to sip a bit of water, and if you click like, I would really appreciate it. So we don't have any audience related questions today on the slides, but you know what? I would like you to If you've been into a number of audits, just type a number in the chat. Like, I've been Alex, I've been into 2. I haven't been to any audits. Just to keep it a bit interactive, that would be fun. If you don't want to disclose it, you don't have to. Right, water.
Okay. I want to ask a question to the participants as well. Again, just an indication, how many of you have argued the case that the auditor needs an NDA before initiating the project?
That's a
So
good point, Daryl. I know what
I'm
you're
very
going to.
interested to hear if you've pushed back on what Alex has just said, that the auditor cannot start a project, a license positioning project, without signing a direct NDA with your organization. The reason that I'm asking it is just out of my curiosity as well, is that I found many times that organizations don't sign NDAs. They Microsoft pushes that clause that Alex just said that means nothing to me because I've never seen it. I've never seen it. Even at Microsoft, it's an NDA, general NDA between Microsoft and KPMG. What's written there? What are the terms and conditions? What's non-disclosure? What goes to Microsoft? What doesn't go to Microsoft? What's data security? What ownership of information? What are they allowed to do with the information? Does KPMG share that information? Do they run off and say to Oracle, because they also audit for Oracle and whatever, and they say Oracle or to SAP or to I don't know whatever company, and say, well, we've just done an audit for this customer and they were totally out of compliance. Why didn't we do an audit for them? And don't think this is completely out of scope. What I'm saying is not realistic. It happens all the time. I've seen customers hit with one audit, and then surprisingly enough, the same year they hit with 5 audits. And for some reason, it's the same company that does the audits. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, Cheryl just said we always have NDAs.
Yeah. So does
Yeah, Prashant says yes.
Prashant as well.
NDA is
Very
a
good.
must.
Very, very important. Okay.
I want to say thank you to Pivox for becoming a SAMexpert supporter. We have so many supporters today, really lovely. So, by the way, Daryl, you know what I'm thinking?
Mhm.
This next section that's entirely your authorship. So I
Let's
could
go.
actually pass it on to you.
Yeah, let's
If
go.
you enjoy talking, we can start. Why audits go
I
wrong?
always enjoy talking. Okay. So let's talk about why audits go wrong. Insufficient agreement knowledge. So one of the things that we've seen, and we still see it today, is that auditors, the people that actually do the audit, are inexperienced and
Yeah.
they're young. They're moving up in the ranks. This might be the first audit, you don't know, might be the second or third. They don't have the know-how of the very specific T's and C's and background of your organization. They do a lot of interpretation. Microsoft doesn't train Microsoft licensing experts the way they did, as we're doing now. So if you're not experienced, you're going to interpret it the way that you think it is, and ultimately, it's going to go wrong. And you must remember that the auditors don't have the back end information to your agreements. Microsoft doesn't provide them all the information
Yeah,
needed. They'll
I
provide them
agree.
with hopefully the MLS, the Microsoft licensing statement, but even that
Mm,
can lack in information. It might not cover all of the entities. It might be lacking information about acquired companies over the years.
mm,
It's your responsibility to make sure that the document that the auditor that's already started the process has the right documentation and understands the documentation and knows your special terms and conditions and knows about the latest merger and acquisition and the divestiture that you went through and so on and so on and
uh-huh.
so on. You
I'll
need to
flip to the
push it,
slide, by the way.
push it, and push it. Okay.
Because
Uh, Entitlement data. So this is basically what I just said about the MLS, but not only the MLS. The MLS, the Microsoft licensing statement, doesn't include any information. And we had a conversation about this previously with a customer of ours a few hours ago not under an audit, but under a very large true-up, where they've got Commvault and nice systems in place. And then the question bears, did they buy NICE and Commvault with OEM? Did that come with OEM? That's original equipment manufacturer licenses. So when they bought the system, that came with Microsoft licenses. And did those licenses come with upgrade rights or with one version right? Was it per processor, per core, per server? Is it a 2010 version or 2018 version? The auditor won't know that. They won't even look for it. They don't even care. Okay, really, it's not their responsibility. If it came with an ISV, that's a different type of license. It's also bundled with the software. OEM is bundled with the hardware, and any specific licensing grants that you've received over a period of time. So this is not part of the documentation that the auditor is going to receive. You need to make sure he has it. Otherwise, just on a couple of big systems in your organization, you could be hit with additional hundreds of thousands of dollars of SQL Server licenses, on-premise SQL Server licenses that you actually purchased with your with the software, but you don't know it because you're new to the organization, or maybe somebody else in a different group did it, and the auditor won't know. So that automatically is going to be double pay. Your responsibility.
Yeah, yeah. They will claim it's a shortfall, and then they could maybe make it or break it in those 5% easily.
Absolutely easy make or
Because
break.
5% is actually a very narrow target, because you know what? If you think about some tools, when we implemented some tools in my previous life, we're not doing them right now. We may come back to that, but we're not doing it right now. If we implemented some tools, even in accordance with ISO 19770-1 and Microsoft some maturity model, 95% coverage is very, very good. It's almost in the dynamic range. So 5% is a very narrow area actually to get into, because you will always have something somewhere around 5% of issues. So yeah, be careful with that. So I'll take this slide, inventory gathering issues. So
But
as the
let me
audit,
just before the gathering issue, I just want to answer
yeah,
Stephen's question. It comes
thank you.
back to the entitlements and data. Stephen's pointing out very correctly that MPSA and CSP agreements don't automatically appear on the licensing
Yeah, I
statement.
should have put it on the slide. I should
Okay,
have put it
very
on the slide.
important. You
It's
need to
important.
make sure that they get those documents as well. They might not
Very much
even look for
so.
them, especially if you're an enterprise customer. They will ask for the MLS. Microsoft will provide it, but those won't appear there. Especially also if you went through some acquisitions over the years and you bought smaller customers, smaller companies that didn't have an EA. They must probably had a CSP or an MPSA or even other types of old licenses. You need to push those licenses to them. So thank you very much, Stephen. That potentially, again, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more. Please,
That's a
Alex.
good point. That's a good point. MPSA is easier to resolve. You just insist that it's included in the MLS as a separate tab. CSP will not get on an on an MLS ever. So then again, you need to provide that evidence, that entitlement yourselves. Inventory gathering issues. I'll take this one because it's more technical. So auditors will insist on 100% coverage. And you know how it happens when we help customers to review their licensing estate. Sometimes when it drags on and somebody's just unwilling to, we're not going to scan that. We're not going to give you inventory for that DMZ. We're not. This is not going to work in an audit. Auditors will just sit there and wait until you actually pull your act together. You will not be able to throw it under the carpet. You will not be able to say, "Oh, our teams are busy. Let's continue the audit without that data." No, you have to provide it. That's and they will also insist on running their own scripts because they don't trust the tools. And if we have enough time today left, I'll give you a few tips about why they don't trust the tools. I have it in the end of the presentation. If that doesn't work, I might release a video about it later, maybe closer to the end of the year. So, what about your own tools then? So, SCCM is not a trusted source. There are lots of reasons why. It's just because the inventory data is bad. Any inventory data will be scrutinized against secondary sources. So we had this when the customer said, "Oh God, we're going to give them data from Snow." They gave the auditors data from Snow. Auditors came back and said, we need you to run this script, in your antivirus system and your AD. And then they compared the results and said, your coverage is only 85%. So they then insisted, and that's something that's a repeated scenario. They insisted that the customer runs scripts on those servers they haven't yet managed to add to Snow. So you can't just go away with we're going to give you an extract from Snow. That's going to be scrutinized, and if you have gaps, and you will have to run the scripts. You can't run the scripts, security, performance issues, they will come on site, or they will have a remote call now because of the COVID, and they will insist that you log into those services and show them the actual screens of the service, not screenshots, not declarations. That's not accepted. So audit is in that case, is a very meticulous exercise. So, I mean, do they ever can you actually drag on this, that long so they actually say, what, we give up? Maybe. I haven't seen it. So if you've seen it, you're a lucky person. So be prepared that delays and hiccups only increase the auditor's bill. That's your problem. You have to take care of the inventory, and that is when the auditors. So when we say the audits go wrong, this is where the audits drag on because of this inability or unwillingness to provide the inside data. So just be warned that.
I want to just add on, Alex, to this 100% coverage. What will happen ultimately if you drag it on and you don't provide the full coverage? They will extrapolate.
Okay? Oh, yes.
Okay, they will extrapolate. Now, extrapolation means that they will just automatically look at what they received and they will extrapolate to what they think is the maximum. And that can be huge numbers. And once they extrapolate, you are in a bad position because you have to defend why those extrapolation numbers are incorrect. So again, by using extrapolation, they are actually positioning themselves in a better place than you are. So you don't want them to extrapolate. It's not in your best interest. And I've seen them when they get fed up, they'll extrapolate 20, 30% forward just to get the order done because they fed up. And then you need to defend that as well. Not a good place to be.
You know how it works. I'll tell you how it works in reality. So if you're not cooperating, they will extrapolate, as Daryl said, and then you receive that report. And if, by the way, that actually helps in large disorganized, federated organizations. I've seen this when the people who ran the audit from the customer side, from the client side, they were struggling with their internal teams because they couldn't move this forward. So they even agreed with the auditor that the auditor will send them an extrapolation report. That was an actual scenario, not once. And then they showed that report to their internal teams, and suddenly, next week, all the data was ready. Because the teams saw how much is an extrapolated shortfall in their area they're responsible for. Nobody wants to get fired. Sorry, I'm being a bit harsh, but that's how it works. So right. So let's get to licensing interpretation. I'm not going to stop much on the other issues. So licensing interpretation, not even calculation mistakes yet. So as Darius, the actual auditing team, how these teams in the auditors are formed. There are very experienced managers, but they're very few. And you're lucky if you get an experienced manager assigned to your audit. There will probably be, in the very start, some apprentices, people who've been in this industry for 2 to 4 years, who may be clever, but then my experience is they're clever but not experienced.
Yeah.
So they don't really know how to interpret certain licensing designs. They're not that creative in terms of licensing. They just stick to a certain scenario. So if you're a licensing geek, when they see an active and passive SQL server, they would assume that you have to license it by the book. So you have to have a license with software assurance on the active node, and then you get the passive node for free. And if you don't have enough license with software assurance, they counted that as a shortfall. They don't look that you have enough licenses without software assurance to assign to both nodes. That's one of the examples. And if you don't know your licensing design, if you don't know how you are supposed to license certain servers, which license is assigned where, to that level of detail, then start preparing today. Get back and write down, document your licensing design. It can be inside your tool, it can be inside an Excel spreadsheet, it can be a Word file, and an Apple Note, but just start collecting that data. So when it comes to interpretation, and there are lots of things in Microsoft licensing that may be interpreted, things like license stacking, things as I just said, license assurance versus alternative scenarios. Do not ever mistake the auditor's big name for the experience and quality of the auditing team. They may be very polite, they may be very nice people. They don't necessarily know every single licensing detail. They don't necessarily attend our licensing trainings either. I wish they did sometimes. Yeah, sorry, I'm being cynical today. Calculation mistakes. So auditors, all of them, they use Excel. What it means is it's predominantly manual. Not only because they couldn't bother to develop a tool. If you understand what I'm talking about, there are no two similar companies in regards to infrastructure and licensing. So you can have certain templates, but the audit or an ALP, an audit report, is always bespoke for a customer if it's detailed enough to be an ALP in an audit, not just a sales ALP. Oh, you're missing 30 licenses. What licenses? Why am I missing them? Audit ALPs are very detailed, and for that to work in your scenario, they must be adjusted to your realities. There must be some filters put in place. And what happens, because it's manual, it's very prone to error. And we see formulas mistyped, just typical, typos in formulas, or certain fields omitted from the formulas. We see calculation mistakes in every audit, not a single one. Every audit, there are mistakes we find in auditor reports. If you don't have somebody who understands how this is calculated, you will be overpaying, I promise you. And the only thing which is funny, I don't know, Daryl, if you agree with me, I have never seen a mistake made in favor of the customer. Mistakes are always in favor of Microsoft. Is that a coincidence, or is it just how these templates are designed? But maybe that's what they validate. They validate. They don't hurt Microsoft. They don't really care about the client. But mistakes are always there, and they must be meticulously checked.
I give them the benefit of the doubt that it's down to inexperience and the complexity of the audit. These are huge Excel files, huge, huge, huge. Many times it goes through various teams within the organization. I don't know if I'm going to surprise anybody, but the core teams, there are sometimes they're even outsourced. So they might not be the core team. The actual people that are delivering the results to you might have not been the ones that have done the number crunching, the huge number crunching in the back end. It could be a different team completely. And it's not one person that goes through the entire sequence. You also need to take that into consideration as well. So be skeptical.
Yeah, I always tell my customers that our clients that whatever you pay, I will probably find enough money to reimburse that just from checking the calculation mistakes, and it always works like that. Never failed. So there's another thing is that mistakes sometimes reappear. So you get the first version of the LP, you say please correct it. Then there is a second version with that mistake corrected, something else introduced, maybe new data, and then you receive the third LP, and then the first mistake suddenly pops back. How that happens, I don't know, in experience or not, but don't think that when you fix it once, you don't need to recheck it again. You need to recheck it again. I advise you to. There's another thing that derailed negotiations is just reliance on commercial resolution. And Microsoft, what happens is, so this is my scenario. This is how I see this. Is Microsoft come to a customer, they usually know a lot about your infrastructure and about your business. They usually know a lot, and they have a target. They have an estimation of how much you probably owe them. Funny enough, they know that. They have targets. Sometimes they're off. Sometimes they're very spot on. And then they come and spot on in regards to, this is a very interesting caveat, to their expectations about it, not necessarily your actual figure. So, and they actually, obviously, the auditors have the targets. So say they come to recover 10 million from you. They think you owe them 10 million. And you start cutting off these things, start arguing with the auditors. Auditors talk to Microsoft and they say, you know what, we had another ELP. And auditors don't usually first release the numbers to Microsoft, but you never know what they discuss behind the closed doors. So what I've seen is Microsoft seeing that that number is starting to diminish. They call CIOs, CFOs and say, oh, let's not drag this on. Let's just, you know what, let's just finalize DLP as is. And you're still fighting back. You say, you know, you're fighting back. You're providing more data. You're providing more. You check the errors, and there's a conversation that's going on behind the scenes. I'm actually seeing that the targets are not going to be met. They're going to push your C-level people into, oh, let's just agree on commercial terms. You may still resolve these issues in the commercial negotiation, but the reality is you get into the negotiation table with $1 million of a disputed shortfall versus 50K. So just do the math. What is your better negotiation position when you go to that table, still having to negotiate other things? You may be right, or you're going there with just with the actual position, and that's okay. Let's talk, dear Microsoft. So, and I've seen unwillingness of teams to go through the pushbacks, and I've seen audits when the management would just take decision. You know what? We're gonna push back, and they in the end they paid more, or they agreed to some other unfavorable terms that they would have paid if they continued the exercise and actually persevered until the resolution, final correct resolution. Right. Mitigation measures. So there are two mitigation measures in an audit. So there's audit defense and there's audit readiness. So audit defense is obviously an exercise. It's a reactive exercise. You react to an audit. So the objective is there are a few objectives there to steer the audit, so it goes in the right way, not where Microsoft wants it, where you want it to go. Control the data flow. Some things should not be given to the auditors. Some things should be reviewed before being given to the auditors. Just to remove rubbish data from there, because sometimes something is just purely wrong. There's a wrong source. You may scan the entire infrastructure, and then it appears that there are you also accidentally scanned someone else's, your neighbor's IP addresses. I don't know why you would configure it, but I've seen it in Russia. When the initial audit data included 2 companies, which the second company obviously was out of scope. So verify the results, obviously, as I said, and negotiate the outcome. That's the audit defense exercise. The audit readiness is a proactive exercise. It's what's part of your ongoing ITAM program. Your audit readiness is just a set of processes or even outcomes from your normal day-to-day processes of managing your licenses and managing your estate, your vendor management, your contract management, your incident management, change management. All that is encapsulated into the ITAM process bubble. Even if you have, and this is a very important note, even if you have perfect readiness, you still need an audit defense exercise, because an audit is a what's the word I'm looking for? Is a stressful event, and even if you're fully ready, you need that interface between your fully ready data your complete entitlement documentation and the auditors to still steer, verify, interpret, negotiate. Just know what I mean? So it's an easy exercise when you're ready. It's a cheaper exercise when you're ready, but you still need it. So let's look at both and defense in the context of the audit process. I simplified the audit process. So this is a step-by-step project. Please click like, and I'll move on, because I need to stick to my promise to make it 90% 90-minute training today. So here we have the basic steps of an audit. And let's not spend too much time on this diagram, because we'll just move on to the first stage, which is the notice. So what before any audit begins, you receive a notice in accordance to the language of your agreement. So during the audit defense, if you're just engaging in an audit defense, what questions you need to ask. So what type of audit is this? Is that a legal audit with a legal basis in the agreement, or is it just a sum review? Can it be stopped? Again, we discussed that. So that's another question you need to ask at that particular stage. Push back or ignore time constraints that are not in your agreements. So you can just push back and say, we're not going to stick to what you're asking us to do, or just ignore it, because there's not going to be any legal repercussions if you ignore something that you're not signed under. Then the next thing, call your audit defense partner if you have one. Unless you have internal audit defense team, I've seen large organizations actually having their own in-house audit defense team because they are constantly in a state of an audit by one vendor or another, or maybe two or three at the same time. And gather your particular team, and we'll discuss it on the next slide, whom you need to include. But if you have any more ideas, please type it in the chat. And then the audit readiness. So if you want to get ready for an audit, so one thing that you need to have, two things actually. So know the terms and have your agreements organized. So when you receive a notice letter, you can immediately lay it on your agreement and just understand, what works, what doesn't, what terms apply to you, what terms do not apply to you, what is something that Microsoft is fantasizing about, what do they have the right to do. For that, in your audit readiness processes, you need to have your complete agreement paperwork ready, and you need to know the terms, not just have a PDFs conveniently organized in a folder. Read them, make notes. In regards to your team, so you need multiple people there. You need techies, because there'll be people who will have to run the scripts. Auditors do not run the scripts themselves. You run the scripts, you give that data back to the auditors. Procurement, who has all the paperwork. So the larger the organization is, the bigger is the chance that all the paperwork is in procurement. ITAM team, obviously, if you have one, those who know the licensing design, I keep saying this collocation licensing design is very important, how the licenses are supposed to be assigned in your environment. And then the legal department to address all the other legal and compliance, confidentiality questions. They need to be involved. In a good audit, legal needs to be involved. Legal need to understand the language of the Microsoft agreements. And they should be fluent at that. So in regards to CFOs and CIOs, so Microsoft would insist, and this happens all the time, that somebody C-level is present on the team and represents the team. What they may start doing, as in any negotiation, this is a trick out of the Microsoft's playbook, is they will start trying to divide and conquer. And what they try and do, they try to divide the CIO from the entirety of the team. And then they send different messages to different people, and they somehow get to their result. Let's stop the audit. Let's just go as I said, to negotiation table. Let's discuss the outcome without straightening out the LP, without fixing all the license interpretation issues, sorting out all the disagreements where you're right. So if you can, obviously, because that depends, but if you can, keep CIOs, if you're a CIO and CFO, I'm talking to you here as well, keep your CIOs and CFOs always informed, and make sure they don't talk behind closed doors. Or if they talk, they just listen and say, fine, I'll come back to you. So don't promise. If you're CIO, CFO, don't promise anything to Microsoft. You may not know the details. That may save you additional money. And all this nice talk about, relationship and stuff like that, that's just a sales talk, so careful. Up to you. It's up to you. You're a C-level person. But that's my advice if you want to listen to it. Audit kickoff. So that's your first meeting with an auditor, and that's a very important stage actually. So make sure there's an NDA, as we said before. If that's an audit, if you going through the actual audit and audit defense exercise, listen carefully to the auditors, because they'll explain. They usually have very good prepared presentations with the process, and they can also give you advice. That advice often is valuable. So it's not something bad. You don't need to dismiss it entirely. So especially in SPLA audits. So sorry for bringing up SPLA, but I've been in situations when auditors would give a really good advice to a customer how to actually minimize the exposure in an audit. So listen to that. So take everything with a pinch of salt, but don't dismiss it. Don't dismiss it. Ask every question you may have. Don't be shy. There's no need to pretend you know something if you don't, because that's an audit. It may end up badly, ask every question, write down the answers. But you yourself, do not give them any data at that time. Don't submit anything. Don't provide any information about the organization. Maybe an org structure. I would even think about that, because there may be instances when your org structure may be a huge surprise for yourselves. Say you committed in an enterprise agreement to license every single affiliate, and then you acquired someone, and that acquisition went above that threshold when it must be included in the enterprise agreement, but you haven't bought yet license for them, but you don't know about it. You just didn't think about it. So maybe at that time, maybe it's not a good idea yet to submit that data to the auditor. So agree on the terms of minimal disruption. That's Microsoft's promise to you. So just agree on how that's going to minimally disrupt your business. And tell them about your in-house tools, because that may save time. As I said, they will insist you run the scripts, but you may still convince them to use at least some of the data from your in-house tool, just to minimize the impact of having to run the scripts on your thousands and tens of thousands of servers. God forbid we talk about clients. And for your audit readiness processes, what you need to have proactively is have an NDA template. That is your NDA template for an audit, like an audit NDA template with what Daryl just said recently, what you need to think about. Have a questionnaire, all the questions that you want to ask the auditor, have it prepared, so you don't make questions up on the way. You go into a negotiation room with a questionnaire. Have your own audit team already for the kickoff meeting. Let them all be, let's intimidate the auditor with the number of people on the team. And always maintain knowledge. So knowledge must be maintained. It's not like a one-off gathering. You need to refresh your licensing knowledge, your audit practice knowledge, your audit defense knowledge. It needs to be an ongoing process. There's a reason why there's a knowledge management process in the ISO 19770 standard. Data gathering. This is where the fun begins. So unless you agree to provide your own data, and unless that the tool's coverage is 100%, you will have to run the scripts. You provide the scripts, you extract the data from your tools. That's what's going on in the data gathering, but that's not all. I have 6 slides on data gathering, so bear with me. There will be at least one secondary source requested, say Active Directory or something else, which will let the auditor understand if your tool coverage is good enough. So be ready for that. They're going to push that you give them a secondary source. Usually that is sneaked through as a part of the auditor scripts, because one of the scripts they run is the AD script. You're not allowed to modify the output. You have to give what they ask. Declarations are not accepted as a substitute for script or tool data at all. You can't just say no. We're not gonna. So in an internal review, this may work when the teams will push back and say, no, we're gonna declare you which service we have, what's installed on them. We're gonna log in, we're gonna take screenshots. That won't work. You will have to run the scripts or give a technical tool output. And also, there's an instance when declarations are required, and we'll get to that in the next slides. Declarations are required for any non-script tool data, something that may not be measured with tools. Number of users and stuff like that, other metrics. So SCCM is not a trusted source, because I'm repeating myself here, but I need to tell you that, if we're going to give them data from SCCM data is rubbish. It's bad. Unless you spent a few years on carefully tuning SCCM, even in that case, I've never seen auditors accepting SCCM data. Maybe for clients. For clients, that's fine, but not for service, certainly. Data, as I said, will be scrutinized against secondary sources. Gaps are not permitted, must run the script. Declarations not permitted, must run the script. And if you cannot run the script, so what's going to happen is manual interactive checks. They will ask you to log into the server. They will ask you to show what's on the server live. So to minimize any delays, what we suggest declaring, but before you declare, run all that data through an SME, somebody like us, your audit defense partner with whom you're working. Let them check that before you declare it, just in case you don't declare something stupid. Naming conventions. So auditors can identify if that's, def or test or something, if that's convenient for you. So they identify it themselves, and they produce a better report, the first version of the report. They don't have to go back to you and ask you additional questions. Give it to them. Naming conventions, if you're happy with that. Dev test environments, just say this is a dev test environment. Just give it to them up front. What's covered with OEM and ISV licenses and SPLA? So SPLA licenses may be brought on premises. If you're in that situation, tell them that this is covered by SPLA from that provider. Let them know. ISV, as Dial brought up this example just now, we had this discussion today. If you have Commvault, SQL Server Enterprise comes with Commvault, some of the licenses of Commvault. Tell the auditors that that particular server is licensed for the Commvault license, and even give them the evidence. Not just tell, give them the evidence. Disaster recovery, high availability, failover, any discounted licenses, let them know upfront how, where you're supposed to assign them. Let them know about your licensing design, at least high level. You will have iterations. It rarely works with just one version of the report, but to minimize delays, to minimize the number of iterations, to minimize the time it disrupts your business, verify that you're happy with the data, give it to them during the data gathering phase. That will just help you have a better report. Entitlement. So meticulously verify their MLS. What may happen? Even get your own MLS and make sure it actually corresponds to your company. All the legal entities are listed there, and not any other extra legal entities listed. All your licenses are there, all your agreements are there. So make sure it's a correct MLS. I have seen instances when auditors were given incorrect MLSs, and they calculated customers' position against wrong numbers of licenses. How good is that? Proof of ISV OEM SPLA licenses. It's not like if you have them, you must have them. So give that proof to them that you actually do have these licenses, and this is how many, this is how, this is on what terms. So they need to see that, not just a declaration proof. Proof of licenses acquired through mergers. CSP licenses, by the way, which are not listed here. I need to add them here. CSP licenses, give it to them. Not going to be on the MLS. They may get it from Microsoft. They may not get it from Microsoft. Better be prepared and give it to them yourselves. Proof of any special grants and non-standard conversions. So maybe non-standard conversions right now are not relevant to many of the companies, but the bigger the company is, the bigger that they will be relevant. So if you, somebody may still remember that in 2016, for instance, Microsoft flipped Windows Server from processor to core licenses. In certain circumstances, you were given more licenses, not 1 to 16 conversion. You were given more licenses in exchange for your 1 to 8. I think it was 1 to 8. For your service, when you had more cores on those servers and you already had licenses for the previous version of Windows Server, it's a bit complicated. But what I'm trying to say here is you may have been given more licenses. There was a concession that Microsoft gave you than the normal conversion formula. If the auditors don't know about it, they will not know about those licenses. That's your responsibility to let them know about it. In some cases, that it may be pretty large. So, say I managed a customer for a few years that had 4 huge server farms, and they converted like that. And instead of getting 16 licenses in exchange for the previous licenses, they had really powerful servers, 40 licenses for each server, 5 times more. So imagine if that wasn't given to the auditor. The next thing, so provide to the auditor your licensing design up front. Save yourselves time. Save yourselves iterations. How you license DR, how you license dev and test. This is how we license it. These are the licenses we assign them. Good if you have a documented licensing design per server. That's the ideal situation. Now, the measures you do to prepare or to defend during this particular phase: audit defense, ongoing audit. Let your defense partner verify the data before you submit it. Do it before submission, and do your own analysis to identify data gaps and issues before auditors find them. So make sure you're giving good quality data that has been vetted. During the so in your audit readiness, this is one of the most important things in your audit readiness framework, in your audit readiness program. So you need to make sure, hopefully it's part of your ITAM program, need to make sure that all the necessary data is ready and up to date. You need to make sure that the tool coverage is good enough so you don't have to fall back to scripts. You need to do regular self-reviews just in case there are any shortages. You don't want to get a surprise shortage during an audit. If you do regular reviews yourselves, there's a smaller chance that you'll get a surprise during an audit. And have a plan of action. When they ask you, you have a plan. We're going to give them this, that. It's in that folder. You see that typical preparation processes, not one-off exercise processes. Then data analysis. So really just a waiting game. Auditors analyze the data. You have very little influence there. So we'll just flip to the next phase immediately. Report. You get the report. So what do you do? As I said, during the audit defense, you must expect assumptions and errors. So you need to meticulously verify, analyze the scope, the formulas, the licensing design, the entitlement, that it's all there, it's correctly interpreted, they didn't make any mistakes, you agree with everything. There's nothing really for the audit readiness for this stage, because this is a reactive stage. You receive the report, you're responding to a report. What you may have here, I'm just coming to my mind, is you may have a process of verification. You may have a list in your audit readiness documentation. You may have a list of, like a checklist of things. We need to check this, and that. Hope it makes sense. Then mitigation. And this is an interesting thing. So then again, it happens on the reception of the report. So data must still be missing. And there may be specific wishes both for you and for the auditor to, and from them, normally they will list all the gaps and all the assumptions on top of the report, all the extrapolations. They will explain normally what they extrapolated, what they assumed, what is missing, and that becomes almost like an action list. At least Deloitte does that. KPMG does that. Not sure about why. They should, because they use the same framework. So you may want to submit your corrections to the report. You found the errors, or you found misinterpretations. You may want to submit corrections to mitigate the numbers there. You may want to provide additional data which was missing, which they extrapolated. Now you don't want it to be extrapolated. This is the data. Please, dear auditor, use this. And you may also want to start proving your case here in terms of data interpretation and licensing design. The auditors may also want to have additional data, which is like, well, they may, as I said, they may request additional data, and they may come on site, and I would expect that to happen because that's a normal step of the process. They may come on site after the report, especially when there are gaps, even if there are no gaps, to actually confirm. It's not like they're saying that you're lying to them, but they have to do it. They would ask you to log into random service and ask you to open certain applications and check that the data that they got corresponds to what's on the actual server. They do a few test measurements. So what do you do in the audit defense exercise here when you want to mitigate? After your defense partner reviewed all of this data, all the additional notes, as always, have a filter before you do the final submission. So you submit your notes, you provide additional data. So do not leave any licensing arguments unresolved, because they will then slip into the commercial negotiation and you will end up discussing a bigger shortfall. So resolve everything with the auditor. If you are unable to agree with the auditor, you're already on the fourth iteration of the report, and they just say, no, we're not taking your explanation. We disagree with your licensing design, but you know that you're right, or you think you're right. Have a protocol of disagreements, detailing every single detail of what you're disagreeing about. Have it in writing, because then if auditors will be stubborn not to fix it, they may have their own point of view. Then you can take that to the negotiation, not just your word. a written protocol of things that you disagreed with the auditor. In the audit readiness in your ITAM program, having a good readiness program just helps reduce the length of the stage. It comes smoother, it comes quicker, and you get fewer report iterations. Did I say fewer? The number of... Okay, anyway. Just looking after grammar, not looking after time. Then the auditors disengage. At some point, you have to let the auditors go. You have to let the auditors go. And from now on, there's only commercial discussion. So you will not be able to roll back to technical. I've seen an instance when the customer insisted that the technical analysis is reopened. So then what happens is Microsoft goes away, the auditor comes back, and that adds to their fees. But you still need to resolve all the technical issues with the auditor. You can only negotiate further things commercially with Microsoft, whether you agree with something, disagree with something. So make sure, this is my strong advice, the ELP is fully finalized with the protocol of disagreements at this stage before you let the auditors go. You don't want complications. Daryl, you reappeared. Do you want to say something? Are you on mute? You're on mute.
Sorry. Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm not sure that your last statement was emphasized enough, and I want to just push on that. When Alex said a protocol of your disagreements that needs to be attached to the ELP, that is, I would say, the most crucial part of your next negotiation phase with Microsoft. Because if you have got a disagreement with the auditor and you don't note it in that disclaimer or in the protocol, or you don't ask the auditor to add that to their final note, it's like it doesn't exist. And that is your pivot to the next stage of negotiations with Microsoft. So you setting the stage. The negotiations with Microsoft have actually started a long time before you sat down with Microsoft. Always remember that. It's not the day you sit down. It's long before that. So you need to be in that mindset. What do you need to position and put in place so when you hit the negotiations, you're ready to go, and you actually got the advantage because Microsoft has yet to get that information. And once the auditor moves out and you have got a foothold in that document of theirs, you actually can then, I won't say manipulate, it's not the right word, but you can steer the negotiations in your direction.
Daryl, do you want to take this slide, please? Negotiations with Microsoft. So yeah, I appreciate you haven't seen it, but
no, that's fine. That's fine.
That's your area. So, that is your professional area, negotiation.
So a number of things come up when you negotiate with Microsoft. One, it's not always about money. Keep that in mind. And penalties, they want something more. It's all about needs. You need to understand what are Microsoft actual needs. The needs are not $1 million from that audit. Sorry, it might be a lot of money, but that's not what the end goal is. So you, at the end of the day, if you're a large enough customer, you have got an account team within Microsoft. Their needs are what's going to drive the negotiations. So you need to understand what they want, what their end goal is. Is their end goal getting a new agreement, moving into the cloud, getting Azure consumption, traction on Microsoft Enterprise E5? What is the need? The goal is the vehicle. The audit, is the vehicle. The audit is not the end game. Remember that. Okay, and you need to leverage your local office. So when you're negotiating with, I don't know, Ireland or Singapore or Redmond, you need to bring in your local office, even if they're not part of that actual negotiation with the auditor. They've got huge influence behind the screen. So you need to get them involved as early as possible, and you need to make them understand what they're going to lose. So potentially, if they want a new agreement on Azure, or if you want to make, or they want a migration, or they want you to put your SAP for HANA on Azure and not on AWS or whatever, You need to make them understand that if this audit doesn't go in the right direction, they will be penalized. You need to make them understand what they can lose. So this gets into a much larger picture. This is where things get interesting, and you need to look at the larger picture than just the audit. Really, really important. And I always say, have a professional negotiator from inside your company. Okay, if you don't have that inside your company, you know where to go, but you need to have a professional negotiator. This is Microsoft teams are highly skilled negotiators. So if you are ITAM or IT or procurement duty doesn't come into the stage, and you managing this, and you think this is just to clear some things up, okay, the truth is with you. You just need to provide them with the truth. Truth doesn't really matter. It's important how you position the truth. So it's all about negotiations. Get somebody on your team, bring somebody from inside your organization. And this is going to take a while. It's not going to be a week or two. But again, you need to look at what Microsoft's timeline is. When's the end of the year? When's the end of the first H1? Or is it going to be H2 coming end of June? You need to understand what's motivating them. And this can go on. And you need to position it correctly for your own advantage. Do you want it to hit your budget this year? Do you need to create a new budget for the next year? So you can play it. You can postpone it. You can move it up and down. Don't be afraid of threats. Microsoft will, I would say, in today's environment, I can't see them taking you to court. It's super extreme. Don't get worried about it. It won't go to court. It most probably won't hit bad PR either. Again, you need to manage it. If it's really big issue, and if you are a publicly traded company, you maybe need your PR manager to be on your side just to mitigate that. But keep it under control. Usually doesn't go out of control. Just keep in contact with them. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Dario. That was very good. So, and then well, you get to the settlement stage where you have 30 days. So, if you haven't agreed on anything else, you still need to settle. Then you have your 30 days to buy the license and pay the fees. So we've come to the end of the core section. Section, but I'm a bit conflicted here, Dario. So if you let me actually use 10 minutes to do the tool considerations, because I promised them at the previous live, and people who watch the part 5, they will come here and they start clicking dislikes because I'm not talking about tools. 5 minutes? Can I have 5 minutes?
No,
Okay.
because Alex is asking me because I'm always precise with time. So 90 minutes is 90 minutes. Alex is scared of me already. So that's why he's asking permission.
No,
But he doesn't need permission. It's just that we're going over 90 minutes. So
yeah, we really wanted to keep today to 90 minutes because the last one, I thought it's going to take 2 hours. It took almost 3.5 hours last time. It was just too long. So the general consideration about the tools is your inventory data may be accepted at discretion. Auditors will always ignore your built-in compliance report. Nobody cares that your tool tells you that you're compliant. I'm sorry, I have to be harsh. Nobody cares because auditors know that tools themselves do not correctly calculate compliance without significant human intervention, without somebody who really knows both the licensing and the tool. Without that, there's no reason. So they may accept at discretion. They may accept the inventory, as I said many times during today's presentation, but they won't accept the compliance position. Now let me explain why in a few slides, because that's what I promised. So you may still and should demonstrate your licensing design in the tool. Why not? But this will be scrutinized, and they will do their own calculations. So firstly, the coverage issue. So tool rarely cover the entire infrastructure. So if you're comparing your licenses with a smaller coverage, you may be compliant in that comparison, but what about the other servers that are not included? So this is why it cannot be trusted. If there are gaps in coverage will not be tolerated. As I said, you will have to run the scripts, and they will obviously, that's why they upfront they ignore what's on your tool. Entitlement issues. So there's no single tool, and I can put my money on that. There's no single tool that correctly auto imports licenses. Or they always require human cleansing. They always require some sort of tweaking, because MLS itself, for instance, is not really a normalized set of records from a database. So you throw it in the tool, and I've done that. I used to throw a whole MLS. I did it once though, so used to throw. I did it once of 10,000 records into a database, a Snow database. I then spent 6 years sorting that out. So don't do that. That's a big mistake. So they know that as well. And we have potential human errors, lots of human errors, misinterpretation, various interpretations, incorrect quantities. So some tools require you to actually pre-process manually the MLS before you import the data into the MLS. Have you done that? Have you made a mistake during that process? Big question. That's why, again, there's no trust at all. Incorrect metrics. Process a license, went into a tool, and then in that tool it became a core license, and nobody checked that. Or it was actually flipped to core for some certain reason, and maybe it was even done correctly. But then verifying that switch of metrics is actually a longer exercise than doing their own calculation. Incorrect products from SKU, but that's an extreme thing. So a license assignment issues, no tool again. Is that sorry, not license assignment. Have I spoken about license assignment right now? Yeah.
No, you
sorry.
haven't.
That's what I was talking about, but I wasn't showing the right slide. So, as I said, no tool perfectly auto imports licenses, and that's a problem. That's a problem. So there may be lots of incorrect quantities and other things. So inventory recognition issues. So this is something that is not that such a big problem, but just remember that some tools wrongly recognize certain editions of certain software, and that fluctuates from a version to a version. So I won't name the tool, but in the recent update, it didn't really recognize SQL Server 2019 for a few months. I don't want to name and shame any tools. So there's another thing that almost no tools, very few, are capable of recognizing editions of SQL Server services like analysis or reporting or something like that. They are fully licensable. They require full SQL Server licenses, and therefore you need to know the edition. Otherwise, how much do you need to pay for that server? If you just run reporting services, but they were installed from a SQL Server Enterprise distribution, you need to pay for a full SQL Server Enterprise license for that service. So that is something that they will almost always require you to run additional scripts, or even log into service and show the additions. License assignment rules. So obviously, so lots of questions. I'm not going to go through the whole list. If you want slides for this presentation, I'm going to send them to everybody who's registered for the test. In the end, when we finish all the 8 sections, we're going to distribute the slides in a PDF format. But if you want them before that, send me an email to ask@SAMexpert.com and just tell me, Alex, can you give me the tools related slides, because I need them. So there are various issues which tools don't support. Does it recognize license mobility? That's a big one. Does it allow you to assign license to a virtual machine? It shouldn't. Licenses are not assigned to virtual machines, but many tools allow you to do that. So you may do that as a workaround, but you shouldn't really. Does it support stacking? So, for instance, license dashboard supports, other tools may not. So it depends. They may only just they pull you into the data center direction straight away, and you may have a license stacking design in your data center because it's just more convenient, and you're compliant. You're doing it right. Does it know how to calculate vCPU licenses? What if you're still using legacy licenses and they work per virtual CPU? Some tools still. And I think what they're trying to do is kind of just throw it under the carpet until these licenses disappear entirely. They still can't calculate the correct number of vCPUs required for a license in a virtual machine. So all these things they pile up, and then again, why would I trust a compliance report from a tool instead of doing my own calculation? So for all these reasons, that is why the auditors always perform their own calculations. That is why you must have humans always overseeing your tools as a part of your audit readiness program. You may not just put a tool there. It's not going to work like that. And, I could do a whole 1 hour long live about it. As promised, 5 minutes. So please click like. And if you want to, this is a wrong screenshot. So the next session, the next training that we're going to have on this channel is going to be about Microsoft negotiations. And that is purely Daryl's session. If you enjoy, and many people enjoy, and I hope you do, how Daryl presents his material about negotiations, that is going to be completely his show. I'll be just flipping the slides. So we please welcome in 2 weeks time. Daryl, I hope you're not on mute.
Yeah, no, those of you that have joined me before, I'm a bit unorthodox with my approach, very open. I can be very aggressive in my way of thinking. So if you want to hear something that's out of the box and got a lot of negotiation professional tips behind it, because I also train on negotiations in my spare time, part of my personal love that I like doing. So yeah, please join me. It will be interesting.
Yeah. Prashant, your question, this is a very, I've got like about 10 questions to ask in return. How to deal with if any non-compliance found in what is ODC? Where client directly provides operating system and other licenses for our employees to work for them. This is an interesting one. So, and this is where maybe double standards are applied. So you can play this double standards card. So if you have, say, a call center that works for a particular customer and it's your only customer, then all your employees that work for that customer, I can see that from the Microsoft point of view, they're qualified users, not yours. You can exclude them from your numbers. But if you then use the same computers to provide service to other customers, here when it becomes really interesting. So, but then again, even when you provide services like that, and the customer provides certain service operating system analyzers to work for them, and the hardware must actually belong to them. They may not give this license to run on your hardware. Then in that case, just push back, just say it's out of scope. It's not our hardware. Go away. I'm serious. Just
And
push back.
especially if it's not in Active Directory, that's a big plus.
Offshore development center. Yeah. So I mean, if you want us to help you to defend you in an audit, just reach out to me. You know where to find me. I think we're connected on LinkedIn. Yeah, Steve, thank you very much for your questions and your inputs today. So we've seen them in the chat. So some of them I didn't put on screen, but trust me, we read them all and really appreciate your involvement in today's live. Hope we didn't say anything that contradicts your experience. Steve messaged in one of his messages that he's been through 100 of audits,
I saw.
even on the side of Microsoft.
But even
Which
if
is
we did contradict it, that's good, because we want to hear his opinion. We don't
yes,
hold the 100% of the truth. We
no.
have our truth, but there are other
Mhm.
truths out there that need to be said. So whatever you think, even if it's not what we said, bring it on.
Yeah. If anyone has any questions, so send them to ask@SAMexpert.com, or if that's more convenient, go to our website, SAMexpert.com. And there's in the there's the contact buttons are everywhere. That's very easy to find how to find us. If you're connected to me on LinkedIn, that's actually the shortest distance from you to me. Or to Daryl as well. You can connect to Daryl.
Happy to.
Thanks very much. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. We are temporarily stopping doing presentations in between the trainings because we are now preparing for the test and for the new year. Busy period is coming right now, very busy. So it's become really busy right now in the system integration world. 25 to 30% increase in business is reported. We are expecting the second wave to reach us very soon. So yeah, but please subscribe to this channel if you like what we do. We are releasing at least one video live every week regardless. In regards to an updated schedule of lives, we'll update you in December. Thanks for becoming our supporters. By the way, all the members, please come on the 1st of November. There's going to be members only. I'll announce it on the community tab. Members only, Microsoft Licensing Clinic for a very small club of people where you will be able to just do a Q&A. Ask us questions, we'll discuss them. We may invite people into the actual live room. So, if you want to, you show your face to the others. So, yeah, that's something I would certainly encourage you to do. And thanks again for becoming supporters. Have a great day, safe with knowledge of Microsoft licensing. And all you learned today about the audits applies to every single vendor, not just Microsoft.
Thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you, Daryl.
Always a pleasure, Alex.